which is if you are, there's a few ways to watch. You can either be watching through YouTube, which would then be to a slight delay, anywhere from a slight delay to an infinity delay, or you could be watching through the Google Hangout itself, at which point you can feel free to ask questions or to have a Q&A. Feel free to ask those. On the side, you should see a Q&A button. If you click that, you will be able to ask questions. Looks like, oh, up to 5 people. Woohoo! This is great. I will turn off screen share. I'm going to come back. It is 5 o'clock exactly. I'm going to probably give it a few more minutes just to see if we can get a few more people to show up. But I hope you're all doing well. Feel free to, during this thing, tweet at the YAV alumni or comment on Facebook or whatever. I will try to pull everything in and say hi to everybody however I possibly can. Well, I think we should probably just get started. I have a couple messages now. Let's see what we're looking at. Nope. Well, we are here. So if you all don't know, my name is Joe Tobiason, and I am going to be your host today. Joining us on the phone, so you should be able to hear her, is Jen Landrein. Jen, is that how you say your last name?
Landrein is my last name.
Landrein, my bad. Jen Landrein, who will be telling a story in a little bit. I hope to have her as loud as I possibly can so you guys can all hear her as well. And then we'll do a little bit of content about storytelling, and then we can end that with as many questions as you guys feel free. And hopefully this can be an enriching experience for everybody. Do know this is the first time we're using these kind of technologies. So with the Google Hangouts thing and that kind of stuff, this is a test. So if we're having troubles, please bear with us. We hope that this is good enough that people want to do it again. And as time goes on, we will get better at stuff like that. So without further ado, let's flip over to the keynote here. And so this is Jen. Let's see.
Yep.
Things are coming along. It's working.
Awesome. It's all a learning curve.
It definitely is. So Jen is a 2014-2015 YAV who spent the year in Boston working in the realm of food and food justice and food sovereignty and advocating for healthy, just, and secure food for all people. From planting and harvesting on a farm to stocking shelves and assisting shoppers at the food pantry and all of the seeds, experiences, and stories and divine moments in between. My year can only be described as a beautiful kind of chaos. I'm a justice seeker, or Jen is. She's a risk taker, a dreamer, a storyteller, and an adventurer. Post-YAV, Jen is living up in Boston, working with 2 of the sites she served with during her YAV year, the Needham Community Farm and the Needham Community Council, and is striving to the love of the world so deeply that its only response is to give back. She believes that our stories have a huge power to change the world and wants to hear yours. Jen, I'm going to hand this over to you. We're really excited to hear your story.
Perfect. So, like Joe said, I served last year in Boston, and so as a kind of backdrop, the site of my story occurred on the farm that I was working for. So, just to put it in a little bit of context, that's where you can kind of envision me throughout this whole thing. So I'll just kind of get right into it. I served last year in Boston, kind of like you said, in the realm of food justice and food poverty. I was day in and day out just consumed and living and breathing and working with food-related issues and how that affects people. And so I was having a conversation with someone one night, and we were talking, and I was passionately describing kind of what my year was about, all the things that I had been doing, both on the farm and in the food pantry, and really just kind of wildly talking about everything that I had been learning and seeing. And this person very candidly kind of looked at me and was like, "That's really great, Jen, but vegetables aren't going to change the world." And it was kind of a gut check moment, and it was honestly the first time all year that I was kind of like, "Wait, what? You mean, I'm not doing all this amazing?"
And this person was very genuine in their statements, but it really kind of hit me hard, and it planted this seed of doubt of, is what I'm doing really making a difference? Is what I'm doing mattering to the world, to this community that I'm in? And so fast forward literally to the next morning. I was up super early because that week the farmer at the farm was on vacation, and so someone put me in charge, and so I was kind of the farm manager for the week. And so I was really nervous about kind of taking on that responsibility, and we had a harvest that morning, and so I got to the farm probably an hour or two before I needed to be there, just to make sure that I had everything organized and set and ready for when all the volunteers showed up. And so I'm super tired and pretty weary-eyed. I'm still kind of upset about the statement that this person said last night. I'm really questioning and kind of doubting, wrestling with what this year means, and what has the last 7-8 months meant. And so I walk into the farm, and I'm kind of getting my bearings, and I start to turn up the middle aisle of the farm, and I see this small Asian woman walking towards me. And it's like taking me a second, because it's pretty early, and I'm like, wait, what is going on? And I realize it's Mrs. Me walking towards me, who I know. She's the kindest, sweetest, most gentle woman who takes one of our gardening classes. And so my immediate reaction is, oh my goodness, Mrs. Me slept on the farm last night, because I had seen her the night before, and I was like, oh my gosh, what if she slept out here? Maybe she got locked in by accident. And then I'm like, maybe she wasn't here last night. I'm pretty sure everyone was gone when I left. Maybe she hopped the fence. And then I'm like, no, Jen, don't be crazy. Like, she's a 7-year-old woman. She did not break into this farm and hop the fence. And so as I'm kind of like trying to process all of this, I noticed she's got this huge smile on her face as she's walking towards me. And so I'm like, okay, like, it's probably okay. Like, she's in sleep here. That's good news. And so she's smiling, and she's waving her hands, and irony of all ironies, Mrs. Me does not speak a word of English except for a few phrases like thank you and hello, goodbye. And so she's kind of pointing, she's trying to tell me what's going on. I'm trying to figure out how she got onto the farm, while also realizing that she most likely walked there. And if it gives perspective, Mrs. Me probably lives about 3 miles away from the farm. And so kind of trying to make sense of that. Oh my gosh, she walked all the way here to tend to her garden. I can't believe she did that. And so still trying to communicate with her in any way that I can to get some context of how on earth she got here. And so I, in a moment of utter desperation, I'm racking my brain for a way to try and communicate with this woman who we do not speak the same language. I'm not understanding what she's trying to tell me. And so I blurt out the word kale in Mandarin, which is the only word I can remember at this point. You see, I was doing a year-long project where I was translating every single thing that we grow at the farm into different languages as a way to make as accessible and inclusive as possible to people. And so in my panic and in my confusion, I literally say the word kale in Mandarin to try and make an attempt of any sort of conversation and connection. And she kind of stops in her tracks and she kind of looks at me like, what are you talking about? And she almost gets this look of defeat on her face of, we're just not understanding each other. We're just missing each other here. And so I'm overwhelmed, I'm upset and tired. And so I literally hang my head and I just start crying, just full of defeat, full of like, what's the point? Why am I here? And I look up and Mrs. Me takes one step forward and just gives me the most genuine and life-giving hug that I think I've ever received in life. And she kind of squeezes me a little bit tighter. It felt like we were embracing for about 5 minutes. I'm sure it was only a quick 5 seconds. But she hugged me and kind of let me go and turned to walk back to her garden. And so I was still like, I need to get the harvest together. And so I walked back towards the shed to kind of get my bearings, get a little bit grounded. And I turned out of the shed to literally go back up to the farm to check on some of the beds that we were going to be working in. As soon as I turned around, Mrs. Me was standing right there, holding a huge bag of screenings that she had just harvested from her garden bed. And she kind of held her hand out and as if to say, take these. And so I held out my hands and she placed this beautiful bag of green beans in my hands. And she gave me one final hug and she literally walked out of the farm to walk back home, kind of having done her duty, tended to her garden. And as she walked off, I kind of stayed frozen there for a few seconds as I desperately tried to kind of just process everything that happened. And kind of in those moments, I was like, okay, vegetables are going to change the world. They changed mine. And so, that's kind of my story. I mean, just the beautiful chaos of what my year was, and just that life-giving moment of we may never speak the same language, we may never understand each other, but we understood each other in that moment. And that time and that space and those vegetables were enough for both of us. And so, yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to step back in. You think you can all see me again if you're watching. Again, that was Jen Landrein. Check her out. Say hi. She's a great human being. I don't know. I really love the story. I love the you told that story this last year at the transition retreat. That was, I mean, obviously for YAVs, as we've gone a little bit of time between transition and then we move on with life, the year is kind of at a different state. Does this story hold, does it hold the same value to you? Has it changed? Do you feel any different looking back on that moment than you did 6 months ago?
Yeah, that's definitely a great question. I think kind of the beautiful dynamic of my situation is that I'm still in the same place and I'm still working for the farm and I still see Mrs. Me on a regular basis. And I still give her rides to the gardening class now. And it's one of those stories I think I view it in different light now 6 months post, but it's still just as meaningful to me. And I don't know, I still feel that connection to her as a human being. I think in that moment of just, we did not understand each other. We could not give each other what we both probably needed. And there was just something about, that space that just transcended everything. And I think I appreciate the story actually a little bit more as I get further and further from the actual event. Just being able to see kind of the beautiful moment that it was, and just to have this person kind of see me as a human being in my raw vulnerability of just kind of breaking down and really doubting. And obviously she knew nothing about my doubt of my year and, what I was doing in my work and everything. But, she gave me the purest thing that anybody could have given me, which was a hug. And so I have her all the time still. And it's just, I kind of always hold that story in the back of my head. And so, yeah, I think it's just as meaningful now, if not more meaningful than when it actually occurred, and even in those few days. And even when I told her that transition, it was kind of the first time I gave voice to it, and I guess no one else really knew about that event but me. And so I think it's cool for me to kind of share it, and it's always good for me to talk about it. It reminds me of just what that transformative moment meant in my year, and now post YAV year as well.
Is this a story that you tell just to YAVs, or do you tell it to other people who may not have had a similar experience?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I told it was at the transition event. I've since told it to a few people at the farm, just because I think sometimes it can be daunting in the nonprofit world, and you can get burnt out, and it's easy to lose perspective. And so I think I've told it to them as a way of, we're not just a farm. It's so much bigger than this farm. It's so much more than just vegetables. It's really about people and those connections. And I think the farm serves as a catalyst for that. And I think vegetables, bring people together in a beautiful way. But yeah, I've definitely since told it kind of as a way of, grounding us in our work, and, why it matters, but kind of the why of it all. And for me, that story still serves as a big why of why I do this, why I give my time, why I served, and why I did serve. And I think it's just motivation a lot of the time, and really grounds me.
I like that. One thing that we'll be talking about more as we get into the content portion of this is the importance of knowing your audience. So if in the story is one that you've told to both a YAV community and to one that's a non-YAV community, what are there differences? Are there things that how does that feel when you're like, or are those even different when you tell the story in different places?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome question. I think there was something about telling it in transition where it's like people can totally relate to just being overwhelmed in a YAV year. And I know everybody has their own story of doubt and uncertainty. And I'm sure those moments of, does this matter? Does this even mean anything in the grand scheme of it all? And so I think the story is pretty great at meeting people wherever they are. I think it's about hope in a lot of ways. And I'm sure the YAVs, like myself, probably saw the hope in that. Whereas, people in the farm community see a different kind of hope in it. So I think it connects to people in different ways for sure. And I think people see it. There's an old proverb that says you see from where you're standing. And so I think kind of people see that story from wherever they're standing, and they can see themselves, in that story, whether it's where I was at my time, wherever it was Mrs. Me at her time. And so, but I find similar reactions from people of just understanding more than anything.
Well, thank you very much, Jen. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you.
And swing back in so people can see me. But thank you so much for spending your time and telling the story. I think it's a really valuable one. And it's just, you're good at telling stories. So it's fun to hear perspectives of So if you wouldn't mind, do you need to run, or would you mind hanging tight?
No, I'm going to stay on.
Okay, cool. I'll do content, and then we'll finish up with a question period. So if you are watching and you have any questions for Jen, once again, go into the Hangouts portion. If you're watching this on YouTube, there should be a link somewhere on the Hangouts page where you can click a link, and or on the YouTube page, it'll take you to the Hangouts. I know this is so jargony, it's crazy. But within that, there's both a group chat and then also a Q&A section where you can ask questions, and we'll be happy to respond to them. And if not, then we won't. But we would love to hear from you and any questions you possibly can have. So I'm now going to step in. Just in case you don't know me, where I wrote my own bio out somewhere. Bear with me, I wrote my bio in third person because I put it on a website. So Joe Tobiason is a native of Seattle, Washington. He attended Whitworth University and graduated with a degree in cross-cultural studies. Following school, he was a 2009-2010 young adult volunteer in Lima, Peru, as well as a member of the 2009 colleague class of the Krista Foundation for Global Citizenship. While in Peru, he translated documents for a dry sanitation program, helped found a youth advocacy organization that helped children growing up in one of the most ecologically contaminated cities in the world tell stories of what it was like to live there, led donor and cultural exchange groups around the country, as well as played hundreds of rounds of Rummy Cube with his host family. Upon returning to the United States, he founded his photography company, J. Tobiason Photography, which specializes in people photography, including weddings, engagements, corporate, and nonprofit photos. On just about any summer weekend, you can find him making photos of couples both in the Northwest and around the world. He has been a member of the Krista Foundation Colleague Council, the Young Adult Volunteer Alumni Leadership Council, and is a photography trainer with the On-Field Media Project, an organization that teaches small donor-based NGOs visual storytelling techniques so that they can better connect with their donor base. In his free time, Joe can be found hiking mountains in the Great PNW, making dinner for big groups of friends, tinkering with his 1990 Volkswagen Vanagon, riding his fixed gear bike that he found dumpster diving, and traveling with his partner Erica, or cheering on the Seattle Sounders soccer team. So that's me. Let's swing on over here. I'm gonna move in so you guys can see the keynote in here. And that's me. If you're interested in any of my work, you can find it. Oops, what just happened? There we go. You can find me at J. Tobiason on just about anything. Let's see if this catches up. Technology, people, it's great. All right, sweet. So as we move into the content, the first thing I'm going to talk about is we're going to talk about storytelling, and we're starting with this. This is one of the many, or like the 5 things the Leadership Council has decided that we want to focus on in 2016. Other things being advocacy, fundraising for the program, community development, and a few other little fun projects. But storytelling is one of the things that every time we see YAV alum get together, it's very apparent how important this is. And so we're hoping to build spaces that YAVs can tell stories and can help tell those stories that they might not otherwise tell, because it is a space of people who understand what it's like to be a YAV, and create safe spaces for that. And then beyond that, we also want to help provide some training just to help maybe you become a little bit better at storytelling. As I said, I am a photography trainer with the On-Field Media Project. The On-Field Media Project goes around the world and teaches visual-based storytelling to nonprofits, but definitely the principles that we teach can be used in a lot of different ways, whether they just be vocal storytelling or if you want to do other things. So I'm going to pull out a few of the principles that I think are important and can be really used well. And with that, here we go. The first piece I want to talk about is, and this is something that I think really comes naturally to YAVs because we do understand the culture that we worked in, but it's telling the story that wants to be heard. I see the slide here and the phrase, the African proverb, until the lion tells his own story, the hunter will always be glorified. That's, if you take it with the context of you're telling your own story, you have the ability to step forward and to do that and to take control of your story. But conversely, now that we're YAVA, now that most of us, Jen is obviously a bit of an exception in that she stayed to continue living into her YAV year, but most of us have left and moved on. And so it's important to tell stories that are honoring to the groups that we've left. One of the organizations that the On-Field Media Project partnered with was called the Daylight Center in Kenya. And one of the quotes from the co-founder was, "We want our Kenyan staff and students to see pictures that they can feel proud of and stories that show them with their best foot forward." So no matter what stories the staff is telling or that their hired photographers are telling, it's about showing them at their best light and showing them who they really want to be. When you think of, as the West, what is the kind of image that we often think of when we are told or think about NGO work in Africa? Well, the thing we often see is that starving baby with a fly on its head. And is that really, that's not really the story that really tells what the spirit of it is, that tells of the lives, that tells of the depth of work being done. Again, I do think that as I'm speaking to YAVs, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but it's important to think about that. And so if you compare this image to this next one, where you have a strong woman who is going to school and has this piece on her notebook that says, "Let your resolve not dissolve." And just what a completely different image and different mindset that has when it comes to crafting a story that is honoring to the people that you've had experiences with and then have moved on. That said, I think there's a good video here that I'd like you guys to watch through, and I think it's kind of fun too.
To the Western world, I am an African man. 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 But do you know who we are? If you've only seen us in Hollywood movies, this is what you might think of us. Machine guns. We shoot our machine guns from trucks. We shoot our machine guns from boats. When you run out of bullets, we shoot rocket launchers. We are obsessed with violence. We hate smiling. Smiling is stupid. We are fantastic role models. We only speak in one-liners, and when we speak, we sound evil. What did you say? You believe in God. Don't lie to me. Staying calm is stupid. Why is the diamond? Why is the diamond? What of this land? However, there is nothing more dangerous than a brave Western protagonist. We're talking to you, shirtless Matthew McConaughey. Are you okay? One thing for sure, a day without hope is a day without living. But you don't really think of us that way, do you? We are likable and friendly guys. And we are even on Facebook. We are more than a stereotype. Let's change the perception. Don't you have a Matthew McConaughey post in your room? No, who told you that? Nonsense.
The thing is that as much as we as YAVs know these things, and this is kind of something that definitely is ingrained into us both with experience and knowing the real stories and the real faces. The thing is that when we're telling these stories back in whatever home is to us now, or wherever we are, it's really important to know where your audience is coming from as well, and to find the balance between those things. You understand the nuance. You understand how to tell that story in a way that connects with that really does tell their real story and tells what the story that the local community wants to be told. But at the same point, it's important to know who you're telling it to and how they're going to perceive it, what stereotypes they already hold, and definitely to be able to challenge those, but to challenge those in a way that continues to push towards something better. One thing that we talk about that really kind of balances out is called the gap of knowledge. If you imagine that there is a bit of a gap between your previous knowledge or experience and something new, if that knowledge is too far, then it's, or excuse me, if those things are too close, then it's uninteresting. And this both happens in like storytelling as far as making the story interesting in itself. If I told a story saying, yeah, so I went down to the grocery store, just like you go to the grocery store, and I bought carrots, just like you buy carrots. And then we go back to them. I cut the carrots up, I put them in a salad and had it for dinner. That's a very boring story because it's no different. There's no gap. There's that gap of knowledge is so small that it's not fun to listen to. But the same thing really goes for culture too. If I'm telling the story to a fellow Pacific Northwesterner about life in the Pacific Northwest, nobody really cares because it's all the same. Like, it's not that interesting. But at the same point, you can go conversely. And so if you're looking on the website, you can see the difference between the square box that we understand and the bright star of color. And that's so different that it's scary. And that's to say, like, if I suddenly came back from someplace that's very far away, if I came back and I'd been living in, if I'd been living in Lima and I told some of the details of the things that I would regularly see at the market or something like that to somebody who was very used to kind of the American meat and potatoes meal, that might be, it's jarring. It's not, it's a way, maybe it's too far in that gap of knowledge from that it's not just interesting, that it's almost, it kind of perpetuates the stereotype. And so this is something that it's important to know, this gap of knowledge, when it comes to both making your stories interesting, but also being able to connect your audience that you fully understand and the audience that or the subjects that you're telling a story about, so that you can find a way to tell a story that balances the distance between those two. And when you find that just right, it creates the perfect balance of curiosity. And that's really what you're going for. Curiosity is what can pull a story along. Whether that's thematically or culturally, it's one of those things that keeps you interested. If you can look at this image on the website, it's a very curious image. Why is that? It's curious because it's this dark room, but it has kind of exotic writing on it. It has this girl running, and you have to ask those questions of why is this happening? What makes this curious? Why this is different than I understand, but it's not so different. The floors are floors. I understand what a mirror is. It's a kid wearing a uniform. Like, I'm kind of tracking, but it's finding just enough of that curiosity to pull you through the story. And the same goes with this image. This Indonesian man. Why is he the only one sitting on a chair? Why is no one else there? What does that imply? The other two are very well worn. So did people used to be there? Are they gone now? What's the story? What's happening? Why is there a little spring on that other chair? Those kind of questions that keep you asking, what is there? I mean, I fully understand the concept of chair. I fully understand the concept of wallpaper, but it's those little details that make that gap of knowledge just enough that I want to know more. And those are the kind of things that tow you along through the story that you're being told. One of the most important storytelling things is, as you look at this thing, you look at 1 + 1 = what? Well, any mathematician is going to say that it's 2. But really, is that a good story? I fully understand that 1 + 1 = 2. We've all learned that since kindergarten, something like very, very early on. We understood that if you took your 2 fingers on your hand and you put them together, you had 2 fingers. Well, that's not a very interesting story. In the words of Ken Burns, the real genuine stories are about 1 and 1 = 3. And that's really what we're trying to do. It's to find that balance, that thing that's just different enough that when you put it together, it doesn't quite mesh with your mind. It doesn't quite mesh with your culture and with your understanding, but it's not so far of a stretch that you couldn't learn to understand it. If 1 plus 1 equals 19, that's not even, it's just too far. You can't even begin to fathom how far that is, how much distance, how much nuance it has to happen for you to get there. But 1 plus 1 equaling 3, okay, there's just something coming in here, just this one little element that I don't understand, and that's what makes it interesting. One last piece is the promise, and I love this in Jen's story. She does a really good job of this, is talking about mentioning how her friend starts off the thing by saying vegetables can't save the world, but then by saying that, she kind of sets you up. You know that as soon as that friend says vegetables can't save the world, yeah, okay, in the end we know that vegetables are going to save the world. It's that promise, it's that indication that this is what that extra 1 plus 1 equals 3, and that 3 is probably going to be something about vegetables. It's going to be something about changing the world. It's going to be something about relating to humans, and how just something different is going to come from that little bit. A good story should give you a promise. A well-told promise is like a pebble being pulled back in a slingshot and propels you forward through the story till the end. It's a quote by Andrew Stanton, who's one of the Pixar writers for Toy Story, Finding Nemo, and a few others. It's those little promises that you have at the beginning that kickstart you into knowing what the story is going to be about, but also how to really contain it. I'm a big West Wing fan, and I was recently watching an episode and then also listening to the West Wing Weekly podcast. Yeah, that's how much I like the show, that I both watch it and listen to podcasts. But they were talking about an episode where they're trying to get a Supreme Court justice nominated. And the story begins with them, with Josh, one of the characters, walking in saying, "Who's the man? I'm the man," all this stuff, and being super proud that he just did all this. Well, if you start with that, we all know that's all, you're just setting yourself up for failure, and it's going to go in a different direction. It's kind of the opposite. Rather than setting up a promise that you know it's going to end poorly, it's more, or that it's going to end well. This is more kind of that boasting, like, we're setting this up that it's going to fail. It's similar to the concept of Chekhov's gun. Anton Chekhov, one of the great Russian playwrights and authors, said, "You say in the first chapter that there's a rifle hanging on the wall. In the second or third chapter, it absolutely must go off. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be there." And really, that's kind of the same thing. It's that promise. It's that little nugget at the beginning of the story that you know is going to go in a different way. I mean, even that video we saw of the African men, by the fact that they started off with these ridiculous statements, everyone knew that they're going to end in a different direction. But it's that twist. It's kind of setting you up for that 1 plus 1 equaling 3. That's kind of all of the content I had for tonight. That's again coming from the On-Field Media Project. If you have any interest or work with a nonprofit that needs some help both telling stories and telling visual stories, feel free to reach out to me. We would love to help. So that's kind of where we're at. Let me see, I'm gonna step off of the screen share and swing back so you can all see me. I see that we have a few viewers on here. Is anyone available? Does anybody have any questions? I see that there aren't any that have come through as of yet on either the group chat or the question section. Also not on Facebook or on Twitter yet. Well, I'm gonna give you guys a second. Jen, what do you think? As we talk through those things, is there any of that stuff that resonates with your storytelling techniques?
Absolutely. I really totally enjoyed all of that. I think for me, storytelling is about authenticity above anything else. And kind of like you said, portraying, I guess when I told my story at transition, I needed to be able to tell that with Mrs. Me sitting right in the front row, looking me dead in the eyes, and to be able to speak truth to my perspective of the story, but to also honor her part of the story as well. And I think that's a real balance that contributes to a good story, is being able to like you said, know your own story, but also knowing the story of your audience. And I think a third piece is knowing the story of the person or people you're telling the story about. I think it can be hard to do sometimes, and that can be a kind of forgotten piece of it. Would she tell this story the same way? Probably not. But I tried to tell it in the most honest and authentic and genuine way as possible that reflects who she is as a human being, and also reflects, what her part was in my story and how I tell it.
I really like what you just said about how it's her part in my story too, and that it really is kind of every story is getting pulled in three directions. That you have you and your viewpoint, you have who the story is about, and then who you're telling the story to, and all are kind of almost, we're getting super meta or maybe like kind of inception-y in this, but that in this like second story that you're telling, or as the story is being told, it's the story of the story. And how those three sides are all kind of pulling on each other and finding the right balance within that.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Well, I still don't see any questions, so I think I'm just going to end it here. We originally had a couple of other stories set up to happen tonight, but due to some scheduling context, those aren't going to be, it just isn't going to happen. But if you like this, especially if you come back and you watch these videos in the future, do let us know on our various YAV alumni social media things, or send an email, yavalumni@gmail.com. We are working, it is YAV alum on Twitter. We're dropping the I. That was a decision of the group in that it felt more of a gender neutral option. We're still working to flesh that out to all the systems. It takes a while to change emails and change websites and things. But please hit us up, YAV alum on Twitter, YAV alum on Facebook, yavalumni@gmail.com. I think it's young adult volunteers alumni.wordpress.com. That one doesn't matter. Use the social media. Say hi. Tell us what you think. If you think this is useful information, let us know, because we'd love to do more of these. We'd love to hear more stories and provide more spaces for people to chat. Thank you very much. And once again, my name is Joe Tobiason, and I'm going to call it a night.